Hello beautiful creatures, welcome back to Your First Custom, a new series here on Of Crafts and Curios, talking all about doing your first ever doll custom in great detail. Today we are talking face ups, everything you need to know about your first ever face up and creating a new face for a Monster High doll, but of course transferable to any kind of doll. What you want to think of first is your character. Who are you creating? And you want to look for a face shape that makes sense for that character, because there are so many face shapes available in the Monster High and Ever After High world, so there are so many options to choose from. And face shape really matters on the kind of story you're going to tell with your character and the doll that you make. Every kind of face has different eye shape, different mouth shape, different jawline, different cheekbones, and you're going to want to choose one that fits the purpose for the character you want to create. I've chosen 3 to show you guys that are really different: bigger eyes, squarer jaws, more pointy chin, just so you can see the kind of variation that's out there. And if secondhand dolls are not available to you and you want to use a Generation 3 Monster High doll, there are some things to be aware about, and you can check out a face-up video I did learning all about the G3 faces and practicing on those myself. The most notable difference for myself is that Generation 3 Monster High dolls have molded in eyelids, which really decreases the amount of variability and customization on eye shape that you're able to do. So that is the real main difference, as well as sort of a molded on smirk. But that can work too depending on your character. So you want to think about who you're creating when you select your doll head. Now let's dive into the technique. First, I'm going to use a quick spray of Mr. Super Clear to make sure that there's a nice smooth and gritty base to catch my colored pencil and pastel. I'm going to do the majority of this tutorial using this Venus head. It's a good in-between head, a medium-sized eye, pretty angular face, good sized lips, so that you guys can get a full sense of what's going on. While I'll also be showing you a little bit on this Twyla hair just to show you the differences between doing pre-wefted hair after face up or doing your hair first and then doing your face up, which you'll get more of an idea of in my next video all about doll hair. So after a spray of Mr. Super Clear, the first step that I do and that you might want to do is working with soft pastels. You can learn more about these in our previous video, and I'm also going to be using watercolor pencils because this is easier for me to add more detail and finer lines. If you are more comfortable using acrylic paints, you can absolutely use acrylic paints for your entire face up. It's just not my preferred technique. Now, if you are going to do re-rooted hair, you want to do that first before you begin your face up, and then you want to cover it off before using any sealant so that you don't get any of that sealant in your beautiful re-rooted hair. I like to use like trash that I would otherwise throw out so that I don't damage something that I wasn't intending to get rid of anyway. Now you don't need to worry about this if you're going to do hair afterwards. So to begin with, I'm going to use my flat brushes to begin with a light pastel color wash in the areas that would regularly be shadowed. If you are someone who does makeup, you can think about this as doing your contour. You want to go to the low points of the face and add a darker color than the skin tone to really exaggerate and bring out those highs and lows in the facial structure. If you're someone who's never done face makeup, you can go ahead and look at face makeup charts on Pinterest to get an idea of how contours work. I do this on all of my face ups, regardless of whether it's going to be a really characterized, exaggerated makeup look or if it's going to be more natural. I always go in and darken the lower parts of the facial structure, so the eye sockets, the hairline, and the cheekbone dip. I'll also go in before a new layer of sealant if I am doing an exaggerated or dramatic look, and I will add a base color of pastel as well. For this doll, I'm doing kind of a dark clown vibe, so I'm going to add black pastel to the lips and to one eye. That kind of helps me track out my makeup look that I'm going to do on the face. With more dramatic looks, I will be more inclined to use more layers of sealant just to lock in pigment, to make sure I'm not smudging anything that I forgot I had just put down, and keep the details in place. For a more natural look, or a look that is more in the same color wheel as the original doll's skin tone, I'm gonna go in and just do layer by layer, more and more shading, just to kind of warm up the eye sockets and bring life to the face, including blushing, before I begin any sort of pencil work. Now, moving on to eyes, it is totally your choice if you want to block out your eye with white acrylic first or not at all. I do this sometimes on darker plastic tones just so that I have a better idea of where I'm going to put my shape, but I do think it changes the texture of the watercolor pencil, so I don't do this often, but you can do this and it's completely personal preference. Now, when I start an eye on a doll, I like to pull it back to the simplest form and the simplest shape. So on screen is a literal picture of my eye, and as you can see, there are really obvious lines in which creates the shape. So I like to start by mapping out the waterline using a red or fleshy colored pencil, and then I go in and add the other creases within the eye in the shape that it would look on a natural eye. As you can see here, I've drawn some lines to show you kind of the lines I lay down first. This, of course, is going to create something closer to a semi-realistic eye shape rather than a really highly characterized cartoony anime eye. It's just preference. You can do either, neither is better nor worse. This is just the way that I prefer to do my eyes, by following that natural shape line, but it's totally personal preference. When it comes to mapping in the iris and pupil, I will use the color closest to what color I want the iris to be, and then I will color that in and then map out the pupil. Normally I go for a smaller pupil and iris, again just preference wise, it's totally up to you, and I like a sort of sideways glance, but sometimes I also like a front-on glance, so again, personal preference. And once everything's mapped out, you're going to use white and black to build up shadows and highlights. That's really all that goes into it once you've got the mapped out shape. The more highlights and shadows you put in more delicately, the more realistic the eye is going to look. But again, if you want a more stylized anime cartoony look, you're going to do more bold and heavier highlights and shadows to kind of have that thick cartoony pen-like look. When it comes to adding eyelashes, you can do a new layer of sealant, but it was just going really well that I knew I didn't need to, so I just went ahead and added in those eyelashes before moving on to a new layer of sealant and beginning the lips. As with makeup, there's no right or wrong colors to choose for your doll's face up, so I'm keeping it really natural for this doll, but you can absolutely do any kind of colors. So with eyebrows, you can go really natural or you could go really stylized. I do short, quick little lines to create mine to look like little hairs. It's just what works for me. And then the final step that I'll use colored pencil for is going in for any skin details like freckles or moles or anything like that. This is always what I add last, and I think that freckles on dolls are the cutest. And then I'll add my Pearl powder to bring some shine and glimmer to the skin and bring some life to the doll. Pearl powder is always the last step, even if you are doing a dramatic look or a kind of highly stylized look, because you really want to keep that glisten and shine. And then you can go ahead once you're finished and unwrap your doll's hair if you did have doll hair. Once I've done the Pearl powder, I'll add a final layer of Mr. Super Clear before moving on to any varnishing or adding pre-wefted hair. If I know that I'm going to be using hot water to style a hair, I will not add the gloss to the eyes and lips until after that is done, but if I know that the hair is not going to need heat treating, then I will just go ahead and add that right away before doing the hair. And that will be the last step of my face up. And just like that, you have a completed doll face up. I really hope you learned something today and you enjoyed this video, and I hope you're enjoying this series. I can't wait to see you guys back here next week with everything about doll hair. Thank you so much for watching.